All right, this is Mr. Barr. I wanted to walk you through Chapter 2 of our Voting in Elections class. In the first chapter, the first set of notes, I guess, we focused a lot on individual voters, okay, and why they vote the way they do, their party identification, how they get that, all those things. Now, let's take a look at some of the other groups that impact the outcome of presidential elections. You can follow along in your notes packet. In each election, members of various social groups that make up the American voting population turn out to vote. They divide their loyalties in varying ways between the major parties. Turnout varies enormously among different groups in the population, rising with income, so higher income people turn out more. Occupational status, if people have a job, they tend to vote more. Education, more education means you vote more. And age, the older the voter, the more likely they are to vote. Republicans are located in groups that turn out a lot. Democrats are located in groups that don't turn out a lot. That gives Republicans an advantage in turnout. So every election, the Republicans, in theory, should have an advantage because the groups that typically vote Republican typically turn out more to vote. Okay? The groups that typically vote Democrat don't show up to vote very often. It's difficult to get them to turn out. Democrats appeal especially to identifiable segments of society, notably disadvantaged minorities that have specific interests. Okay? Democrats win presidential elections by activating these interest groups and persuading them to turn out. When Democrats win elections, if you look at the history of it, it's when they get more than their voters to vote. This isn't always easy, since among the groups that characteristically turn out at lower rates, immigrants, the young, the poor, the well less educated, the less well socially integrated, tend to favor the Democratic Party when they vote. So it's difficult for Democrats to turn them out because they don't typically turn out. All right? Younger people your age, don't turn out to vote. Older people do. Older people tend to vote Republican. So it takes something very, very specific and very, very strategic and special to get Democrat voters usually to show up in big enough numbers to win an election. The Democratic Party starts most elections with a turnout disadvantage. That's a key thing we should understand is, in theory, on paper, Republicans should win every election because every group that votes Republican turns out more. Obviously, Democrats have won elections, so what changes? Well, we'll get to that in a little bit. Republicans win presidential elections by doing slightly better than Democrats and better than usual for Republicans among groups who normally don't associate with a social group. White voters, middle-aged, some with a college education, and Protestant. So all they do, those groups that don't belong to an identifiable social group or an identifiable group in society, all Republicans have to do to win is do slightly better than Democrats and better than usual for Republicans. Let me give you an example. Donald Trump in 2016 got a higher percentage of the evangelical vote than Mitt Romney did. It wasn't like Trump got more Democrats. He just did better than Republicans normally do. In areas of Florida where Mitt Romney got 40% of the vote, Donald Trump got 45% of the vote. That extra 5% is a lot more votes, and that's how he was able to win those states. In years when Republicans do slightly less well among these groups, which are very large parts of the population, Democrats win. Okay? It's pretty simple. In the years where Republicans don't do as well among the groups that turn out the most, Democrats win. If groups don't like Republicans for whatever reason, they stay home, they don't vote, they don't participate as much, they don't turn out at the normal rate that we expect them to, then Democrats win. It's that simple. Politics is a turnout game. Elections is a turnout game. 2020 is all about turnout. If Biden turns out his base and gets a few more voters over that base, he's going to win the election. If Trump's base stays home for whatever reason, Trump's going to lose the election probably. As a result, each party has what we call a coalition, a reliable group of support that they rely on in each election. Roman Catholics, Union members, and Southern whites have become less important to Democrats since 1932. Now, That it used to be that was the base of the Democratic Party. Now they rely more on votes from non-whites, non-Christians, younger voters, and well-educated professionals. That's the people that they target to try to get out to vote now. They don't target union members like they used to. Union members might still be Democrats, but they typically don't vote as much as they used to. The Republican Party has maintained its support in the business class, among Christians, and among Southerners. Democrats have held an advantage within the Northeast, the urban Midwest, and the Pacific Coast, while Republicans predominate across most of the South, the Great Plains, the West Central, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, the Dakotas, places like that, okay, and then the Rocky Mountain states. Not Colorado, interestingly enough, though. Colorado's a swing state. All right, that concludes part 1 of the lecture. We'll pick up with part 2 later this week. Thanks for listening.